We are with Aurobindo in the delight of works. And three things Aurobindo reveals to us which we need to understand and differentiate in the totality of the movement of work: the instrument, the force, and the master. So the instrument is, of course, the body and the mind, through which the forces pour out upon the world. And for the instrument to share the delight of the divine, the first thing that Aurobindo is bidding us to rise up to is to be free of the egoism of the instrument and to be equal in whatever use the divine may choose this instrument for. And so beautifully he reveals to us that the instrument does not ask that I should be used in this way or that way. There is a very beautiful aphorism of Aurobindo, something to this effect, that there are two things that God likes in his devotee and servant. One, to sweep his temple floors in silent adoration. And second, to fight for the great world battle for his divine consummation in the arena of the universe. And between them there is all the rest. Whether the instrument will be used for sweeping his floors like Shabri, or fighting the great world battle like Arjuna, whether like Vyas it will pour out truths unseen by the mortal mind, or whether it will be led to the seclusion of the heart shrine to silently and quietly adore its master and beloved, we should leave it for the divine to decide. So when the instrument is equal, when it doesn't make stress of choice by egoistic preferences, and it's so difficult to, this ego can conjure in so many ways, and the worst of ways is, I am the instrument for this work and the mother wants me to do this. I am indispensable for a particular work. The mother says that even works that we feel serve the most, we should be disinterested even in those works and activities. So there should be no preference by stress of desire and egoism. And when we choose by that preference, because we are identified with the instrument, that we go through pleasure and pain, suffering and joy as a result. This instrument that nature has created is not an ordinary instrument. In Aurobindo recounts the famous words of Kalidas in one of his writings. Shariram khalu dharma sadhanam. This bodily instrument is a means for the fulfillment of dharma. At another place in one of the Upanishads it is said that all the gods chose to dwell in the human instrument. When they saw all other forms were made, they refused that no, this is not worthy of our presence. But in the human body, there is something about just this form, just this instrument, that the gods have plunged and have chosen to reside into it. It's an irony that they have to struggle so much to emerge. And in fact, there is a whole occult science of the Vedas which denotes each part of the physical being to a certain personality or godhead. So we have Varuna and Brahmanaspati in the regions of the head. We have Maruts that move the speech to function. We have Mitra residing in the chambers of the heart. Ariman, the great battler, warrior of the worlds, in the mid regions. And Bhag, the enjoyer, the divine, the one who gives the divine enjoyment, who provides that little joy of life that we receive in the very base of the spine. And these gods usually do not function openly, they are hidden. They are hidden and they work from behind. because this instrument is hardly, though it contains these gods, it is hardly put to its godly use. Normally, in the ordinary movement of nature, in the ordinary state of a being, it is put at the service of the ego, and it is run by the fuel of desire. And because this bodily instrument is open to all kinds of forces and influences, therefore it is so prone to illness, disintegration, and all kinds of maladies. So, this has to be attuned to a higher mode of functioning, which is directly Sri Aurobindo's yoga, that this instrument, which is right now so attuned to the lower play of nature, must be upgraded and become fit and ready for the higher workings, for which it is not yet ready, not yet prepared. So this is what we had read last time, and we were revealed by Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo reveals to us, the sword has a joy in the battle play, the arrow has a mirth in its hiss and its leaping, the earth has a rapture in its dizzy whirl through space, the sun has the royal ecstasy of its blazing splendors and its eternal motion. O thou self-conscious instrument, take thou to the delight of thy own appointed workings. Wherever we are put in place, we must take the delight of the divine working in that place. So there is an interesting example that comes to light, because often we look at the instrumental nature and compare people and get into an egoistic mode. But what is the greatness of an instrument? There is a very interesting film that was shown on the life of Bismillah Khan, the famous Shehnai maestro, and someone asked him at the end of the whole session, his interview, that you are really so great, and how have you really mastered this art? So he say, people have something to this effect. People say that Bismillah Khan is great, people say that he plays the Shehnai great, but greatness is of him who has made this Bismillah Khan. It is such a beautiful, simple thing, such a simple yogic truth. And yet, because we are identified with the instrument and cling to it, we suffer when it is broken. But when it is broken, actually nature is intending to prepare a better instrument. In one of his aphorisms, Sri Aurobindo says, "Wouldst thou weep because thy dress is torn away? Has not the Creator already made a new dress for thee? Have you not already paid the price?" So each life is a price we have paid, and depending on the kind of price we have paid, the price here is the sacrifice that nature extract, there is a new dress which is being prepared for us. So if we have paid a very less price, very little sacrifice, almost exclusively turned for our egoistic purposes, still nature will create a better instrument, but more or less on the same pattern. But when we have paid the price, then depending on that, a new dress is given to us, a dress which is more fit and worthy for our evolutionary purposes. This sword did not ask to be made, nor does it resist its user, nor lament when it is broken. There is a joy of being made, and a joy of being used, and a joy of being put aside, and a joy too of being broken. That equal joy discover. So what is the joy of being broken? The joy of being broken is that, look, he is making a new instrument for my habitation. So there is a joy in everything. A joy in the play when the divine uses the instrument. A joy when he puts it aside, because if the instrument has served him well, so he keeps it by the side. That, look, be ready, I may use it any moment. And when he feels this instrument needs to change, so he breaks it and prepares a new one. So we have to discover that equal joy. And we read that for that we have to cast again and again. He casts us again because we have used the instrument in wrong ways, only for desire, for personal aggrandizement. Therefore it must be passed through the red hell of the furnace of anguish and suffering again and again, so that one day this instrument can learn the human lesson. Next, Sri Aurobindo bids us to rise to another truth. Know thyself next as the worker. So we often say so and so is a very good worker. There is only one worker, and that is nature. Nobody else is a worker. When nature is quiet, withdrawn, silent, asleep, the best of workers lies helpless. Ask somebody, one may be a great worker, but when one is asleep, very few can suddenly rise up and spring up to action. Why? Because nature has gone into a state of quiescence. When somebody is tired and fatigued, because nature has withdrawn its life energy, unless of course we begin to draw from higher founts of sustenance. So nature is the worker. Understand thy nature to be the worker, and thy own nature and all nature to be thyself. Nature is not unique to one person. It's not even unique to humanity. Nature is everywhere. In the sun, the stars, the drift of the galaxies, in the building of atoms, in the shock of a star, as he says, in the blossoming of a flower, in its self-concealment in the seed, in the creation, in the running of a beast, in the hiss of a snake, in the sting of a scorpion, in the blue of the sky, in the green of the forest. Whose is the hand that has painted the glow? When the winds were asleep in the womb of the ether, who was it roused them and bade them to blow? He is lost in the heart, in the cavern of nature. He is found in the brain where he builds up the thought. In the pattern and bloom of the flowers he is woven. In the luminous net of the stars he is caught. So this is nature, universal, all nature. And yet it is also individual. This nature self is not proper to thee nor limited. Thy nature has made the sun and the system, because there is one nature. It's not two nature. Within us is concealed the same nature which has woven the stars. And if we can identify with it, we can actually unweave the stars and pass into the silence beyond them. That's what yoga does. Thy nature has made the sun and the systems, the earth and her creatures, thyself and thine and all thou art and perceivest. So even our perceptions are created by nature. Through the senses we perceive. So nature not only gives motion, it works, but also creates these many forms, and the way we receive them and understand them. Understanding is nature, responses is nature, and there is a whole way of looking at life as nothing else but nature. It is thy friend and thy enemy, the mother and thy devourer, thy lover and thy torturer. There is a beautiful line in the Gita, Atmanev, Atmano Bandhu, Atmanev Ripuratmana. Thou art thy own, thyself is thy friend and thyself is thy enemy. So this double nature in man, Sri Aurobindo brings out at many places. Here he has given in a nutshell that there is a double movement of nature. There is a movement of nature which takes things toward disintegration and collapse. There is a movement of nature which takes things towards heights, upliftment and ennoblement. So this is the double movement. And in one place in Savitri he compares it very interestingly. He says the ignorant movement of nature is like the mother who ties the child to its apron strings. It doesn't let the child go far and wide. So ignorance keeps us within a limited movement of nature. It doesn't allow us to grow, expand, to become wide. So there is one kind of nature which holds and thereby keeps us tied down to the lower movement. And there is another movement of nature which is vast and high and proper to the gods. The sister of thy soul and an alien and a stranger. So it is sister of our soul when it rightly obeys it and moves according to the will that is concealed within us. And it becomes an alien and a stranger when we enter into its darker movements, into those territories which are not proper to our own soul, which Sri Aurobindo is revealed subsequently. Thy joy and thy sorrow, thy sin and thy virtue, thy strength and thy weakness, thy knowledge and thy ignorance. These are the two modes in which nature functions. In the Gita it's very interestingly said, I am Abhaya and I am Bhayam. So I am both fear and I am fearlessness. So there is this double nature, and there is the lower movement and the higher movement. When someone asks Sri Aurobindo that all is the mother, so some people take this stand that all this is the mother. So this is one way of understanding it. So Sri Aurobindo says, yes, yes, even this inferior nature is come out of her. But we are not to identify with this movement of nature, but with the higher movement that is proper to the next evolutionary leap. So there is knowledge, which is a movement of nature, Vidyamayi, and there is ignorance, which is also a movement of nature, Avidyamayi. In the early stages, we need to move within these confines of ignorance, and later on, this same nature, Diti, releases us as children of Aditi. And yet it is none of these things. This is still a movement, but something of which they are attempts and imperfect images. For beyond all these, it is an original self-knowledge and an infinite force and innumerable quality. This is, we see in everyday life, each creature is limited by a certain movement. But within that range, there is such a tremendous perfection. It is amazing when we look at the way a bud or a seed blossoms into a tree, develops into a tree, and the fruit and the flower. There is such a perfection. Each step and stage of working is as if marked out. The turn of the seasons, the springing forth of the first sprout, and everything else is as if ingrained within it. So when we look at the surface movement, the tree itself is ignorant. But behind this, there stands a vast intelligence. In fact, if we see anything in nature, we can go deep and discover a perfect consciousness that is hidden within it, but limits itself to the form. So Sri Aurobindo is saying, if you go to the depth of nature, what we call nature is only a frontal projection, a surface movement of a vast, infinite intelligence and power, and this surface movement derives its strength from that. Which means everything in nature has its counterpart in its highest. So this changes the whole way we understand life, because when a schism is created between nature as it is, with mind as its highest, and the soul and the divine above it, then the only choice left is either we remain within this nature or we quit it and go away. But Sri Aurobindo tells us that this inferior nature is itself derived as a shadow from a supernature. Then there is a possibility that we can ascend, and this nature itself can ascend to a higher mode of functioning. And that's where Sri Aurobindo says that just as there is the trilogy of Ishvara, Brahman and Purusha, there is the Shakti, Maya and Prakriti. So this Prakriti and all its movements is a very imperfect attempt to recreate the many moods of the original infinite mother, the transcendent Shakti. And that's where it catches something of that impulse and tries to create it. Something it catches of her dreams and tries to create it. But these are yet imperfect images. But in thee there is a special movement, a proper nature and an individual energy. So this again is different from Buddhist thought. In Buddhist thought, all this is a stream of consciousness and energy which is flowing. There is nothing like an individuality, it's an illusion. But Sri Aurobindo tells us that there is, as if like a knot, nature chooses to individualize in us. There is a special movement, and that movement is keeping in line with the Gita, the Swadharma of an individual. So within each of us, there is a special way that nature seeks itself or moves towards its own heights. And Sri Aurobindo describes that so beautifully. Follow that like a widening river till it leads thee to its infinite source and origin. So when we follow our true nature, then we grow progressively towards a greater and greater wideness, greater and greater strength and power towards higher and higher degree of its own absolute. And when we act in contradiction to this true nature, that's the time we become more and more alienated we become more and more cut off from the delight that sustains us. So, to experience the delight of works, we must follow the true movement of nature within us, and that is the task given to man. So, this itself, of course, is a whole discovery. Know therefore thy body to be a knot in matter, and thy mind to be a whirl in universal mind, and thy life to be an eddy of life that is forever. So when this formation of nature is withdrawn from us, where does it go? It mingles with universal nature. Nothing is really lost. When individual life passes out of this body, it goes into all life. When the body itself drops dead, its material substance mixes and merges with the universal matter. And when the mind or the individual movement of the universal mind within us, that is released once again into the universal, it passes off into the world of ideas and thoughts. This is very interesting because one of the verses of the Ishopanishad, the very first one, this aspect that nature is at once universal and individual is beautifully revealed in the very first sloka of the Ishopanishad. Isha Vasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. So Sri Aurobindo translates it as jagatyam jagat as each individual energy of motion in the universal motion. So nature is universal as well as individual, because the divine is universal as well as individual. He has two modes of functioning. So we have to discover what is proper to us and act according to that. Know thy force to be every other being's force, and thy knowledge to be a glimmer from the light that belongs to no man, and thy works to be made for thee and be delivered from the error of thy personality. So we have to be true and faithful to our true nature. At the same time, we must know that in others, their own nature is leading through its own way, whether through the ways of ignorance or through the ways of knowledge. When that is done, otherwise we identify with nature and say, this is me. So just as there is the error of identifying with the instrument, there is the error of identifying with the nature, movement within us, and mistaking it for our true personality or the true person. When that is done, thou shalt take thy free delight in the truth of thy individual being, and in thy strength, and in thy glory, and in thy beauty, and in thy knowledge. And in the denial of these things, thou shalt take delight also. For all this is the dramatic mask of the person and the self-image of the self-sculpture. So we will see that oneness everywhere, and yet act in the world of multiplicity, knowing that all this is the mask. And there Sri Aurobindo brings this powerful movement. Why shouldst thou limit thyself? Feel thyself also in the sword that strikes thee, and the arms that embrace, in the blazing of the sun and the dance of the earth, in the flight of the eagle and the song of the nightingale, in all that is past and all that is now and all that is pressing forward to become. Actually, this is an experience which human beings or any creature has when it is close to death. It is known, in fact, in human beings, it is known by a strange term, Stockholm syndrome, where people who are captured by terrorists and about to be killed suddenly become very sympathetic towards those who are going to kill them. Even the prey which is captured by a hunted animal, suddenly towards the end, it is said, it enjoys the joy of being devoured. It may sound very paradoxical, but that is because all nature is one. And at a moment of death, it gets a glimpse of that. There is a very interesting story in the Mahabharata. The war is over and there is Ashwamedh Yagna. So Arjuna is the spearhead of the Yagna, and along with Krishna as the charioteer, is going from kingdom to kingdom. Now the kings have this choice either to surrender or to fight the battle. So there is a young character, most of the people have not heard his name. His name is Praveen. This is a real character, this is not a story. So Praveen He's a youngster, he hardly knows much about, he is of course a prince who is trained in the warcraft like all the princes, but he's no match to Arjuna. So he asks his mother, what shall I do? She says, look, you are a Kshatriya, you have to fight. Death is inevitable, doesn't matter. If you fight in tune with your true nature, even if you die, you evolve. And if you run away from the battlefield and surrender, then that's not proper to a true Kshatriya, so go and fight. So as the story goes, he goes and he is a great Krishna Bhakta. So there is the fight going on, but somehow Arjuna is not able to conquer this young prince. And he asks Krishna, what is it? I am trying everything, but somehow I am missing the mark. So Krishna says, you don't know his secret and you can't kill him this way. So he says, what is the secret? So Krishna says, he is surrendered to me and he will give in only if he sees that the arrow that strikes him comes from me. So as the story goes, it's of course an occult understanding of these things. Krishna says to Arjuna, now you invoke my presence in the arrow and fight. So he invokes Sri Krishna's presence and Sri Krishna seats himself at the tip of the arrow. And as it goes towards this young prince, he sees, recognizes and surrenders himself to Krishna and falls in that state of glory. So there is this possibility of our consciousness developing to this extent that it can actually experience the entire thing as divine play, and yet it is not confused about its own place in the totality of working. We see in Mahabharata another instance, and that instance is of Bhishma. Bhishma is asked, why are you taking sides with the Kauravas? You know that, truth is on that side. He says, I know, and I know that 100 Bhishmas cannot defeat the Pandavas. I know that, because truth is with the Pandavas. I am just doing the task for which I am appointed, and I'll do it faithfully and to the best of my ability, offering it to him. So there is Bhishma, and he himself reveals the secret of his fall, because he knows that in the totality of the play, I must fall. This is the truth. So there is a possibility for human consciousness to arise to those levels where it not only feels that nature working through oneself, but also when it falls and the sword that strikes it, so beautifully Shubinda says, it feels even in that the hand of God and a divine working. When that is done, thou shalt take thy free delight in the truth of the individual being. The worker has the joy of her works and the joy of her lover for whom she works. So this nature has a twofold movement of joy. One, when there is a work. So all creative activity which is impelled by the truth of our being carries in it a joy. And that is one of the indications that we are in tune with the truth of our being. When we act according to the truth of our being, a door of delight opens. The action itself carries a joy. In fact, that's why when people say, this concept that what am I getting for my work? So if we were to ask the divine, what are you giving us for our work? He will say, if you act according to the true nature, I give you instant wages. I don't wait for 1 month calculation and give you the wage. And that wage is delight. Instantly, when the work is in tune with the truth of our being, we experience delight. All other things come, and they come afterwards. So here he is saying that there is a twofold delight. One is the joy of the works. And to that delight we can add another joy, the joy of service to the master. And when these two joys come together, then it becomes infinite times. She knows herself to be his consciousness and his force, his knowledge and his reserving of knowledge, his unity and his self-division, his infinity and the finite of his being. Know thyself also to be these things. Take thou also the delight of thy lover. So while on one side we have to act in this world of multiplicity, act in accordance to our true nature, according to the role appointed for thee by the divine within us, yet whether we wrestle or embrace, we must know it is God whom we are embracing either ways. The instrument is finite in a personal image. Oh, we missed a line. There are those who know themselves as a workshop or an instrument or the thing worked, but they mistake the worker for the master. This too is an error. Those who fall into it can hardly arrive at her high, pure, and perfect workings. So now Sri Aurobindo is taking us to the third and last level. That is a small passage, and we can read it together. That it is not enough to be identified with the force that moves us. It is not enough just to have our Swadharma. We have to go one step further, and he is already giving a hint. When the Swadharma is laid at the feet of the divine in the service of the lover, then we become ready for knowing the next step. The step at which Gita stops, Sarva Dharman. First it explains to Arjuna the Swadharma. It says, act in the light of your highest consciousness. Don't worry about sin, virtue, and all these things which are, bothering your mind. If you act in the light of your highest truth, then that's what is given to thee to act. But then at the end it says, I'll reveal to you one more secret. But don't tell this secret to everyone. He says this also, and that secret is Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyo Mokshishyami Mashucha. Then he discovers, as the poet says, that wherever there is Krishna and wherever there is Arjuna, there is victory. So Sri Aurobindo tells us, know last the master to be thyself. Not this ignorant instrument, not this force of nature. But who are we? But in our secret self, a part and parcel, a portion of the infinity of the divine being. But to this self put no form and seek for it no definition of quality. Be one with that in thy being. It's a presence, that's all we can say. A presence which is individual and universal and infinite. Commune with that in thy consciousness. Obey that in thy force. Be subject to that and clasped by it in thy delight. Fulfill that in thy life and body and mentality. This is the whole, completes the delight of works. A perfect instrument, moved by the higher forces of nature and laid at the service of the divine, which is none else but our own secret self. Then before an opening eye within thee, there shall emerge that true and only person. This person reveals himself, this inner guide, this inner master, first as an ideal, then as a quality, this or that. Then we go beyond these qualities and see him as the origin of all qualities and yet not limited by any of these. Sri Aurobindo reveals that in the synthesis very beautifully. Thyself and not thyself, all others and more than all others, the director and enjoyer of thy works, the master of the worker and the instrument, the reveler and trampler in the dance of the universe, and yet hushed and alone with thee in thy soul's silent and inner chamber. This is the inner meaning of the Ras Leela, where all the gopis are dancing, and whom do they find at their core and their center? None else but Krishna. Each one keeps pace with Krishna, and Krishna dances with each one according to that particular movement. So this is the higher consciousness, because Gop and Gopis are all keepers of light. The word literally means guardians of light. So these guardians of light dance with Krishna. To each, he dances according to that. He molds himself in the image of the individual. And yet, he is not just dancing with us, but with all, with this entire universe, which is his playfield. Sri Aurobindo beautifully describes in this whole idea in one of his poems, where he speaks of the Ahana is invoked, dawn, the goddess dawn, to light our consciousness. And it gives the secret to man that, look, I want to come down, but you are so much tied with your senses and you are indulging with desires and egoism. How can you really receive me? So to receive me, you have to be ready. And then it says, if you lend yourself to me, I have brought with me a chain which can tie Krishna himself. And then you can dance with him forever. on the banks of Yamuna and share in the ras and the ecstasy after. So Ahana brings down that chain which can tie Krishna himself with this creation. So that's a very powerful poem. The joy of the master possessed, there is nothing else for thee to conquer. This triple delight, the delight of the instrument, the delight of nature, in service to the master, the instrument faithful to the presence and the higher nature. For he shall give thee himself and all things and all creatures, gettings and havings and doings and enjoyings for thy own proper portion. And he shall give thee that also which cannot be portioned. So then we don't have to worry. Like today we say, if I work, what will I get? He who serves the divine looks after all material, emotional, vital, intellectual, spiritual needs, because she is a mother to our wants, a tranquil counselor and mentor, a friend in our difficulties, chasing with her smile and sunshine the clouds of gloom, doubt and depression that assail the seeker. So at all levels she gives us, and much more than any human tongue can utter. So he's saying, not only that, you will get the proper portion of the universal prasada of delight, but also he shall give thee that also which cannot be portioned. There is the infinity of the divine consciousness which is present in all, and you cannot divide it. So he comes and gives himself to us if we give ourselves to him. That is the whole secret, that if nature gives itself to the divine gives itself to nature. Thou shalt contain in thy being thyself and all others, and be that which is neither thyself nor all others. Of works, this is the consummation and the summit. What a summit and what a consummation.